wife and I moved to the Hudson Valley in 1984, and I got my MFA at New Paltz College, and I teach there now. And very soon fell in love with the landscape of the Hudson Valley in general, but really in the New Paltz area. I used to spend a lot of time, we lived in Philadelphia before that, I spent a lot of time driving to places to paint. Because once I started painting outside while I was in art school, I became convinced that I wanted to be a landscape painter. But living in the inner city left us, left me having to find subject matter. So I would explore the areas outside of Philadelphia, and I actually settled in on Tinicum Marsh, south Philadelphia, near the airport, which is a beautiful place to paint, but not all that peaceful, because it's right near the airport, so it would constantly be planes coming over and highways right near it, and trucks and things like that. So one of the things I really value about where we live now is the possibility of finding some solitude while I'm out in the fields painting. And over the years, instead of driving a lot of different places, I was looking for something new and different to paint. I've kind of, my territory has become pretty proscribed, and most of the paintings in the show are done within, maybe 1/8 of a mile of each other in this place. It's called the Old Gatehouse area, and if any of you are familiar with the Mohawk Mountain House, it was the original, well, not original, but it was the kind of ceremonial entryway to Mohawk Mountain House property. The Mountain House itself is about 4 miles away, but the Gatehouse is in New Paltz, just outside of town, a couple miles outside of town. So you'll see these ones, there's several with this alley of trees, and that's the old Gatehouse Road where they would take you by a carriage up to the Mountain House in the days before there were automobiles. And now it's just a beautiful, peaceful place to walk. Some people bike or jog, and I go out there. Well, I've been fortunate this past year I was on sabbatical, so I've been able to go out and paint almost every day. And thanks to a very mild winter, I was able to paint outside every month of the year this past year. I don't think I was ever able to do that before, partly because I'm always teaching. But this year, being on sabbatical, also having a mild winter. So in some ways, as you look at these paintings, you can think of them as a walk through the fields. So I go out in the morning. I've been going out earlier and earlier because I used to go out in the middle of the day because I like the consistency of the midday light, like between 10 a.m. and 2. The light doesn't change that much, but it's awfully, it can be awfully glary at that time of day, and the colors wash out. And I found that if I go out early in the morning, it's the light is softer and it's more peaceful. I really like the early morning light. So I'll go out, and I typically do not know when I'm going to paint that day, but I know I'll find something to paint. So I try to really leave myself open to the experience, because I found that if I, for instance, well, I can give you an example. There's a tree on the back wall that I've painted several times. It's a big old silver maple out in the middle of the field. And I remember one day I was going in to teach, and there was a beautiful light on the tree. I said, I'm going out to paint that as soon as I get off from teaching in the afternoon. And then went on the afternoon to paint. Of course, the light was completely different, and I was very disappointed. And I did a terrible painting because I had visualized this painting in my head, and it wasn't there anymore, and I was struggling against what I was perceiving and what I was remembering, and it was a bad experience. And so having expectations like that, I found was a little bit counterproductive. And what I would do is I would go out with my paint box on my back and a panel. I paint on wood panels, 12 inches square typically. I kind of settled into that format years ago because it was simple in a way that I didn't have to decide, am I going to do horizontal painting today, a vertical painting, how big do I want it to be? I try to eliminate options in a way, or choices, or having to make a decision, because that can paralyze you having to make decisions. So if you make them in advance and just kind of decide, well, I'm just going to work in a square format for a while, I got very comfortable with that. So I go outside and I really think of it as I'm going for a walk, and I usually spend 30 minutes walking the fields and seeing what's going on. And sometimes I'll see something immediately that provokes me visually and says, this could be a painting. But I'll keep walking for a while, and then often I'll come back to that because in my head I'm starting to already paint that painting. Or sometimes I can't find anything for a while, and I start to get a little bit anxious. But I realize that there's always something to paint, and it's kind of, for me, it's a matter of it's like a wedding between the two things I really love: being outside in nature and painting. Very stimulated by color, so flowers, very attractive to me to paint. For years I wouldn't paint flowers because it didn't seem like serious subject matter, but I realized at some point that I was passing up a lot of opportunities because I just found myself so attracted to the color that I thought, why not indulge in that? So I've been painting flowers for the last few years, pretty intensively during the summer months, and just trying to react to what's going on instead of trying to impose some kind of preconceived idea onto the painting. I try to work with the circumstances. So in some of the paintings you'll see a play of light and shadow, that of course is completely dependent on the circumstances. That's a tree shadow, and by the time I'm done with that painting, that shadow's not the same shape. I mean, usually about 15 minutes into the painting, the composition is unrecognizable in terms of what I started with. And then it becomes a very dynamic situation. I have to make decisions about, do I stay, how true do I stay to my original vision, and then I'm working partly from memory at least, and how much do I want to incorporate the new dynamic, what has changed. And in particular, these flowers, this is chicory, and it's a weed, basically, that grows on the roadsides mostly, but also in the fields out where I paint. And it's a very ephemeral flower because it only grows in the morning. It blooms in the morning and then shrivels up by the afternoon, and those blossoms die. And the next day, more blossoms come out on the same plant. They're tall stalks, and if you look closely, they have all these little buds on them that will blossom. And something about the ephemerality of that flower, both in terms of the color, because the color is really hard to get, because the colors in shadow can be like a deep, almost purplish blue, and if it's in sunlight, especially if it's backlit, it can take on a kind of warmer, much paler blue, very delicate color. So the color is always changing, the flowers themselves are changing. Often by the time I'm done with a painting, like this one, I remember this day, again, that play of light and shadow was was a real challenge, you know, because every time I looked at what I was painting, it was different. You know, you're seeing the light coming through the leaves, and it's a little bit breezy, and the whole thing was like watching a motion picture or something and trying to capture it. And by the time I was done with that painting, there were almost no flowers left. They had all shriveled up. So there's something I find very, very beautiful about those flowers, that they just last for less than a day. And but when you get out in the morning and the light is on them, or they're in shadow, or that interplay between light and shadow, I find really, really beautiful. And it's something that I like to meditate upon. That's something that came up earlier, this idea of meditation. I've come to think of many of these paintings as a kind of meditation on nature, and a meditation about consciousness, and about perception, and about painting, which of course is about consciousness and perception. And so it would be very hard for me to stand or sit in one place for 3 or 4 hours and just watch the light change. But I can do that while I'm painting, because I'm doing something and I'm active. So it's kind of an active meditation. I'm kind of attaching myself in a way to my perceptions provoked by that visual phenomenon, and moving back and forth between that and my painting in a very kind of dynamic way, and having to make adjustments to the changing thing. So, you know, so for instance, a flower that might start in shadow then might suddenly light up because the sun has moved, essentially. And then I think, wow, I like that. I'm going to change that. I'm going to light that flower up now, or vice versa. Or I might retain what I put down before. So it becomes a very, it's a very stimulating experience, and it's a very, again, I like to use the word meditation because I feel very focused. And there's a funny phenomenon that happens to anybody who paints or you know, does anything creative, dancing, theater, or anything. You lose complete consciousness of time passing. I never know, you know, when I finish a painting, I have no idea what time it is. I don't know how long I was standing there. And also, I never feel fatigued while I'm painting. But it's funny, you know, as I put the last stroke down, I step back and say, yeah, it's finished. And I feel this draining of all my energy, and I just feel completely exhausted, pretty much. And I'm not good for much else until I get a nap. But the nice thing about going out early in the morning, then I have the afternoons off, and I can go for a hike or swim up in the mountains. And so I feel very privileged to have access to this environment, both for painting, but also, you know, we like to hike a lot, and go biking in the mountains, and go to these remote lakes and swim and things like that. So being outside and being painting are just, I feel like it's a great blessing to be able to enjoy both of those things.